When you hear the name AC/DC, your mind doesn't go to one hit. It doesn't go to a scandal, a fashion trend, or even a music video. It goes straight to sound. Raw, electrified, unapologetic sound. From the first notes of High Voltage in the mid-70s, to the arena-rattling stomp of Thunderstruck in the 90s, and even into the surprisingly defiant albums of the 2000s, AC/DC never changed who they were. They didn't need to. Formed in Sydney, Australia in 1973 by Scottish-born brothers Malcolm and Angus Young, AC/DC wasn't just another pub band trying to make it big. They were a mission. A two-guitar freight train with one goal, to bring rock and roll back to its dirty, bluesy, primal roots. Their early performances were chaos incarnate, Angus duck walking across beer-soaked stages in a schoolboy outfit, Malcolm grinding out riffs like a locomotive, and the band's original singer Dave Evans trying to ride the lightning that surrounded them. But that lineup wouldn't last long. In fact, the AC/DC that we know, the AC/DC that became legend, really began in 1974 with the arrival of Bon Scott. Bon Scott wasn't just a singer. He was a force of nature. A former postman, a failed bagpiper, and a hell-raising wanderer with a voice made of gravel and gasoline. With Scott at the mic, AC/DC songs became tales of rebellion, lust, drinking, fighting, and living hard with no apologies. He didn't just sing about being a problem child, he was one. Albums like TNT, High Voltage, and Let There Be Rock didn't try to be deep. They didn't chase trends. They were loud, fast, funny, and proudly stupid in all the right ways. But they hit like a sledgehammer. AC/DC, in their early years, were the antidote to everything fake and polished. They weren't trying to get on the radio, they were trying to blow the speakers out of your car. The band toured relentlessly. Bon would take the stage shirtless and sweat-soaked, screaming into the night while Angus shredded through endless solos. They weren't innovators. They were purists. They took the old Chuck Berry formula, electrified it, distorted it, and turned it into a global juggernaut. But the ride didn't last. In February 1980, just as the band was about to finish work on their next album, Bon Scott was found dead in the back of a friend's car. Alcohol poisoning. He was 33. The band was shattered. But what came next would change everything. In the wake of Bon Scott's death, most people expected the band to fold. You don't just replace a frontman like Bon. He wasn't just the face of AC/DC, he was the fire. But just weeks after burying their brother, the Young brothers made a decision that would redefine rock history. AC/DC would carry on. Not to erase Bon's legacy, but to honor it. Enter Brian Johnson. A gravel-voiced singer from Newcastle, England, with a screech that could shatter glass and lungs that sounded like they'd been forged in a steel mill. Bon himself had once praised Johnson after seeing him perform with his old band, Geordie. The connection felt right. But no one could have predicted what was about to happen. In July 1980, AC/DC released Back in Black. It was more than a tribute, it was an explosion. From the ominous bells of Hell's Bells to the chugging anthem of You Shook Me All Night Long and the title track's iconic riff, the album didn't just revive the band, it launched them into a different orbit. Back in Black sold over 50 million copies worldwide. It's one of the best-selling albums of all time. It didn't change AC/DC's sound, it refined it, amplified it, immortalized it. They didn't pivot to suit the times. The world pivoted to them. The 1980s brought a tidal wave of change to rock music. MTV glamorized bands, synthesizers invaded soundscapes, and stadiums filled with flashy production and choreography. But through it all, AC/DC stood their ground. No synths. No soft ballads. No reinvention. Just amps, sweat, and riffs. Albums like For Those About to Rock We Salute You, Flick of the Switch, and Fly on the Wall kept their signature sound intact even if the critics didn't always approve. But fans didn't care. They knew what they were getting, and they loved it. In a sea of one-hit wonders and overproduced acts, AC/DC was a rock-solid constant. Angus Young, the eternal schoolboy in a blazer and tie, never let go of the band's core identity. Malcolm, the rhythm architect, kept the engine running smoothly. Cliff Williams locked in the low end, and Phil Rudd's drumming stayed as steady and primal as ever. With Brian Johnson up front, The band didn't just survive the decade, they dominated it without ever changing who they were. As grunge rose in the 90s and swept away the glam metal scene, ACDC's refusal to adapt became their strength. While others scrambled to stay relevant, ACDC didn't blink. They didn't care about trends. They only cared about rock. By 1990, many of ACDC's contemporaries had faded, fractured, or given in to changing trends. Rock music was morphing into grunge, alt-rock, and hip-hop-infused hybrids. But ACDC, once again, didn't flinch. They opened the decade with a cannon blast, the razor's edge. From the first notes of Thunderstruck, fans knew the band still had it. That opening riff wasn't just catchy, it was electric, a shockwave that proved ACDC could still command global attention without changing their formula. Many Talks became their biggest U.S. hit, and suddenly a whole new generation was headbanging in bedrooms to a band that had been around before they were born. The Razor's Edge tour was a monster. Giant stages, packed stadiums, and Angus Young still duck-walking across the platform like a man possessed. He didn't slow down, and neither did the crowd. What's stunning is this: AC/DC released Thunderstruck in 1990, over a decade after Highway to Hell and Back in Black. How many bands can dominate two separate eras without changing their sound? It wasn't nostalgia that drove the crowd, it was power. Pure, unapologetic power. While Angus shredded his solos under a spotlight, it was Malcolm Young in the shadows who built the AC/DC sound. He didn't care about fame or showboating, his rhythm guitar was the backbone of every song, every riff, every thunderous hook. Malcolm didn't just play the rhythm, he engineered it like a brick wall. Few fans realized it, but Malcolm's writing and arrangements were the glue of the band. He knew when to step forward and when to vanish into the mix. He could take three chords and make them sound like a freight train barreling down the tracks. But the relentless touring, recording, and pressure took a toll. Malcolm battled alcoholism throughout the 1980s, eventually stepping away briefly to recover. And in 2014, it was announced that he had developed dementia. He quietly retired, unable to continue playing, and passed away in 2017. His departure marked more than a personnel change, it was a seismic shift in the soul of the band. Without Malcolm, AC/DC was like a building missing its foundation. They continued on, but fans and critics alike felt the absence. Yet even then, the band honored his legacy by doing what Malcolm would have wanted: keep playing. Keep rocking. Never give in to sentimentality. That was the AC/DC way. By the 2010s, AC/DC had once again proven that their rock wasn't just timeless, it was immune to trend. Black Ice, 2008, and Rock or Bust, 2014, both charted at #1 around the globe, pushing millions of copies at a time when physical albums were almost extinct. But behind the thunder, cracks were forming. Brian Johnson, the man who saved AC/DC after Bon Scott, started suffering from severe hearing loss. After years of performing next to Angus's fire-breathing Marshall Stacks, Johnson's ears were giving out. During the Rock or Bust tour, it became clear, continuing could mean total, irreversible deafness. Against his will, Johnson stepped away in 2016, mid-tour. It was a painful moment not just for the band, but for fans. Brian had become part of the AC/DC fabric. Replacing Bon had seemed impossible, yet Johnson made it work. Now, his departure felt like the end of an era. Again. But what happened next? That was stranger than fiction. When news broke that Guns N' Roses frontman Axl Rose would step in for Brian Johnson to finish the Rock or Bust tour, the rock world collectively blinked. Axl? Really? The unpredictable, famously volatile singer who'd feuded with half the industry? It sounded like a mismatch. AC/DC was raw, straight-ahead power. Axl was layered, theatrical, and complicated. But when Axl took the stage, something unexpected happened. He crushed it. Fans braced for disaster but got one of the most technically skilled vocal performances in AC/DC history. Seated due to a broken foot, Axl still hit notes Brian hadn't reached in years. He didn't impersonate Johnson, he honored him, while channeling Bon Scott's sleaze and swagger. The band sounded tighter, sharper, and more energized than they had in years. For all the controversy, Axl's run with ACDC wasn't just a Band-Aid fix. It was a high-wire act that reminded the world, this band is built different. You could swap voices, lose pillars, suffer loss and exhaustion, but somehow, ACDC just keeps rolling. While fans were still reeling from Brian Johnson's health crisis, another blow struck ACDC, one far more devastating. In 2014, just before Rock or Bust dropped, it was announced that Malcolm Young, the band's rhythm guitarist and co-founder, was retiring due to dementia. The news hit hard. To many fans, Malcolm wasn't just Angus's older brother, he was the engine room of AC/DC. He wasn't flashy. He didn't run across the stage or play solos. But Malcolm's rhythm playing was thunderous, flawless, and absolutely essential. He was the rock in hard rock. Without him, many wondered, could AC/DC still be AC/DC? The band, ever stoic, said little publicly. Nephew Stevie Young took Malcolm's place, having already filled in before. He captured Malcolm's sound, style, and stance, a living tribute to the man himself. But fans knew the truth, a giant had left the room. In 2017, Malcolm passed away. It was the end of a quiet legacy. A man who avoided interviews, who rarely stepped forward, but who helped build one of the loudest bands in history. A man whose riffs changed rock forever and whose departure marked the beginning of the band's final chapter. Most bands in their 60s and 70s drift into nostalgia reunion tours, greatest hits, farewell concerts. Not AC/DC. In 2020, during a year when the world stood still, AC/DC came back to life. Out of nowhere, they dropped Power Up, a new album with Brian Johnson back on vocals, Phil Rudd back on drums, Cliff Williams back on bass, and Angus leading the charge. Even Stevie Young returned, continuing to honor Malcolm's place. It wasn't just a comeback. It was a resurrection. Power Up debuted at #1 in 21 countries. Critics praised it as their best work in decades. Brian's voice, bolstered by experimental hearing tech, was restored. Phil's drumming had the same punch as it did in '79. And the riffs? Pure AC/DC. Raw. Loud. Unapologetic. The album was dedicated to Malcolm, a final love letter to the man who helped write many of the tracks before his death. It felt like closure, but also a reaffirmation. After everything, AC/DC wasn't finished. Not even close. They didn't beg for sympathy. They didn't bask in nostalgia. They just plugged in and played. When Power Up dropped in 2020, the world was still in lockdown. Concerts were canceled, tours postponed, and fans wondered, would AC/DC ever hit the stage again? No one expected them to. Brian Johnson was 73. Phil Rudd had legal baggage. Malcolm was gone. But once again, AC/DC did what AC/DC does best, defy logic. In 2023, they finally returned to the stage at the Power Trip Festival in California, a legendary lineup that included Metallica, Iron Maiden, Guns N' Roses, and AC/DC. For many fans, it felt like a miracle. For others, it was confirmation, AC/DC was still alive, still dangerous, still thunderous. Johnson sounded fierce, raw, and reinvigorated. Angus, though older, shredded in his schoolboy uniform like it was 1979 again. The set list pulled deep into the vault, not just Back in Black, but early cuts like If You Want Blood and Riff Raff. The crowd roared. The amps blared. It wasn't nostalgia, it was proof. This wasn't a retirement tour. It wasn't a cash grab. It was a band showing the world that even after half a century, their pulse was still pounding. So what makes AC/DC the last real rock band? It's not just longevity. The Rolling Stones are older. Aerosmith has had decades in the spotlight. But AC/DC never shifted. Never softened. Never followed a trend. They've been mocked for it. Critics often say every AC/DC song sounds the same. But fans know that's the magic. In a world of chaos, AC/DC brings consistency, clarity, and confidence. They don't need synths. They don't care about chart formulas or social media virality. They just plug in, crank the Marshall stacks, and hammer out 3 chords like it's a religious ritual. That kind of purity, that refusal to bend, has become rare in rock music. Bands split, reunite, genre hop, rebrand. But AC/DC? They stayed the same. And that's exactly why their music still fills stadiums, why Thunderstruck is played in every sports arena on Earth, and why teenagers in 2025 are still discovering high voltage and air guitaring in their bedrooms. AC/DC isn't nostalgia. It's a heartbeat. As the amps quiet and the final chords echo, the question remains, what does the future hold for AC/DC? Are they the last guardians of a rock tradition that's fading away, or just one band among many? Truth is, AC/DC's legacy is not just about music. It's about attitude. It's about an unapologetic love for raw power and no-frills rock and roll. They showed the world that you don't need to be flashy or trendy to be legendary. You just need to be real. Younger bands may experiment with genres, blend styles, or chase digital fame. But AC/DC stands like a monument reminding us what rock was and can still be. Angus Young's schoolboy outfit, Brian Johnson's gravel voice, the thunderous riffs, these are symbols of a bygone era that still refuses to die. Their influence echoes in every power chord played today, and the DNA of countless rock bands worldwide. The torch may pass on, but the flame that AC/DC lit burns bright. And if they are truly the last real rock band, then maybe that's not a tragedy, maybe it's a legacy. Thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive into AC/DC's unstoppable journey. They're more than just a band, they're a testament to the enduring spirit of rock and roll. In a world where music constantly changes, AC/DC's refusal to change is their greatest strength. They remind us that sometimes, less is more, and authenticity can outlast trends, scandals, and time itself. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss a deep dive from Southern Sound. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What's your favorite AC/DC song? Have you seen them live? Let's get that rock conversation going. Until next time, keep the amps loud, the spirit wild, and remember, real rock never dies.